The first thing that changed everything was I just wrote my story. I was like, I'm 28. I'm a high six-figure entrepreneur through real estate and other assets, and I explained that in the thread. If I lost everything today, here's how I would get it back in half the time. And I literally just listed everything I did and learned along the way. And overnight, that story went viral. And then I just got tons of traction. I was just like, wow, this is a story. People really like it and they resonate. It resonates with them. And so I just started studying and sharing stories online, and it just gained traction fast.
Hi, my name is Majero, and welcome to Build Your Thing, the podcast where we help content creators find their unique creative voice, build their tribe of loyal fans, and monetize their work. My guest today is Parker Worth. Parker has built an audience of over 41,000 followers on social media within just 18 months by using one simple device. And this device is called storytelling. Yes, the art of telling stories that resonates. And in this episode, he's going to walk us through the exact process of how he did it. He's also going to give us actionable advice on how to start telling stories that don't suck to build a loyal and profitable audience. And with that being said, let's get started. All right, Parker, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here, man. I'm really, really excited. I've had some great guests, and it's an honor to be alongside them.
The honor is on my side. So thank you very much for accepting the invitation. And yeah, you know the drill, right? When you are on a podcast episode, you always have to tell your backstory. And since it's basically an episode around how to tell stories, we just want to know, what's your backstory, Parker?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up pretty much in the middle of nowhere in the forests of New Jersey. If you can believe it or not, they have forests out there. And basically, I don't know, I was a bad kid in high school, got into a lot of trouble. I'd been arrested 3 times before I was 18. Anyone could say my life projection wasn't looking too good. In fact, a police officer told me that once. He's like, yeah, it doesn't look like you're going to do anything with your life, which was interesting. I had some low points around there. I was a janitor, and there had been a moment where I accepted that I would be in custodial services, cleaning up after people for the rest of my life. It was awful. And basically, there was a point where I just needed to learn. I just kind of had an epiphany of, I need to invest in myself. I need to learn skills that I can offer to society, that I can offer to others, that would make me more valuable as a person to society, right? And lead me to making more money. So I went to college to basically learn electrical engineering, worked as an electrician for about 7 or 8 years. Was very fortunate. I got to travel the world working on embassies and military bases. And essentially always had this taste of wanting pure freedom. And I read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, and they call it 4-hour fever. And just the idea of being able to work anywhere you want, whenever you want, was something that I was absolutely obsessed with for years. And it took me about 7 years of failing and trying and, just dropping the ball on a lot of things and quitting to finally start getting some momentum and have an online business that I do now that lets me do what I want when I want. So that's kind of like the big picture, gist of everything.
That's really interesting. So what actually triggered this epiphany of you feeling the need to develop skills?
Yeah, well, it was like somewhere in between scraping parking lots for change and eating chicken fingers out of garbage cans. A big thing is like not liking who I saw in the mirror or what I was doing. I knew that I could do something better. And it was just a matter of your skills, right? Like having skills that you could offer to society. And it was really interesting because I wanted to be an electrician because I got paid well. I've always been fascinated with electricity. It's this magic energy that we harness to automate and move everything. And yet, if you don't know what you're doing, it'll kill you and burn you from the inside out. And however, I don't know if you're into Naval. I'm sure you might be, Matt. A lot of people talk about this, but he talks about climbing. If you climb the wrong mountain and can't get to the peak, don't be afraid to go back down the mountain and take another route. And so with my electrical career, I ended up getting promoted. I was running massive multi-million-dollar projects, but I was absolutely miserable. The pay was great, but I couldn't choose my location. I would get sent to different states. on a weekly basis. I worked every day. I didn't have a social life. It was a miserable existence, and I know I needed to change it somehow. And so the epiphany there was like, okay, now I have these skills, but I can't offer electrical skills online, or it's a lot harder. It's in a lot less demand. I started like a podcast about electricity, a blog about electricity, and they both failed because I didn't know my audience. And so I guess like the second epiphany was reading that from Naval. And I was like, maybe I'm at the wrong part of the mountain. I need to go back down and choose another path, which ended up being, storytelling, copywriting, and social media writing.
That's very interesting. So, especially when you see, those quick success stories online, right? So basically you hear people, well, I went from 0 to 1 million or from 0 to 10K, whatever the number, right? In just a short period of time. Like when people who are just getting started creating content actually see that, I also think that it just sets the wrong expectations. And the interesting thing that you mentioned is that you've been trying a lot of different things. One of them was obviously creating content around your expertise, which was electricity. But were there other things that you've tried in the past in terms of content creation, perhaps in terms of side hustles that where you didn't really succeed?
Yeah. So I've done a ton of side hustles. I flipped real estate and did tax lien investing, and all of those, just like my content creation career, my online business career, were just always in the beginning catastrophic failures. For example, I learned tax lien investing, which is basically you go to an auction where people don't pay their taxes, and you pay their taxes for them. And in return, you get a large interest rate payment. So basically, you're paying this person's taxes, and you can get an 18% return. And like, I read every book on it, and I went and accidentally foreclosed on a lot in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, that's completely worthless, that I still have to pay taxes on today, and made a lot of mistakes there. But just kind of just having this chip on my shoulder where I just relentlessly go after stuff. It's kind of helped it, even with like flipping houses. Like, I almost bought a terrible house. I remember when I renovated my first house, it was an absolute nightmare. It cost so much money. It ended up working out in the end, but yeah, that's like, real life, not internet stuff that I've done. And then basically, biggest mistakes side hustle wise I did online was blogging. Like, I was an electrician. I didn't have any skills online. I wasn't an internet marketer. I wasn't a copywriter. Wasn't a web designer. I didn't know any of this stuff. And so like, my problem was that I just chased this information and this hype from gurus. Like, the first thing that came up on an ad on my Facebook, I would click on it and buy it in the hopes that it would work. So it was like blogging, how to get rich off blogging, right? And it was like, oh, just write blogs about your expertise and you'll get traffic and then you can sell stuff. And I wrote for, 3 to 6 months about electricity. And what's wrong with that is that most electricians don't read. They like to listen to podcasts. So I was using the wrong medium to contact my target audience. And so like, anyone listening, that's something to think about before you dive in. I made this mistake over and over again, trying to target electricians. And then it took me 4 months to get to 100 followers on Twitter, because I was writing to electricians, and there aren't any electricians on Twitter. You can search it, and there's not a lot of 100K electrician accounts. And so that's the biggest thing I learned, is making sure you know where your market is, and how to go after them and how to find them and communicate to them in the right channel that's going to get you the most results fast.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I would like to ask, so you've been writing about electricity and also talking about it, right? Because you started also a podcast around that for 3 to 6 months. And then you see, like, how did you actually define, well, I should pursue, because, success rarely happens within 3 to 6 months. How did you actually took the decision to pivot, right? Because you always have like this thin line between pursuing something and then just being stubborn and seeing, well, this obviously doesn't work. So how did you actually make the decision to switch to something else?
Yeah, it was really interesting. So I was on a phone call with Sam Parr, who's the host of My First Million. He had like um, the My First Million podcast. He had a way to pay him, and you get on a coaching call with him for 15 minutes. And I talked to him, and I'm like, I have this podcast about electricity. And he's like, yeah, you're making a mistake. You need to channel people from social media to your podcast. And so he said you should learn to grow on one platform. I asked him what platform to grow on. He said Twitter. And so I went to Twitter and wrote about electricity to no avail for about 3 or 4 months. Couldn't even get to 100 followers. I was miserable. Because I was working 60 to 70 hours a week. I was spending all these money on courses to learn how to grow on Twitter, and I couldn't grow. And what I really loved about Twitter and X is the entrepreneurial spirit there. Like almost everyone on there is like grinding and hustling to start their online business. So I made a lot of friends with common interests, common ambition, and I thought that was really cool. I really liked what it was in 2022. It was a bunch of people with essentially the same common goals as me. But after that, I knew electricity wasn't working. I tried blogging, I tried podcasting, and then social media in regards to talking about electricity. And I was just like, does this really make me curious? Like it's kind of boring. And so I did the exercise of asking 5 to 10 family members, hey, what 3 things do you think I'm good at? And basically you look at the responses and see which responses overlap, which are said multiple times. And almost everyone told me storytelling. They're like, you have crazy stories. Because like I said, I traveled the world working on U.S. embassies and military bases. And I've been to like 40 something countries. And basically a lot of them aren't the best countries in the world, and just seen a lot. So I've got some crazy stories under my belt that a lot of people were more interested in than, say, electricity. So that's kind of when I made the pivot.
Okay. And how did you combine basically storytelling with online business, and how did you, like, obviously you had this natural interest towards storytelling, but how did you, quote unquote, became kind of an expert in this field?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I still don't consider myself an expert. There's still a lot to learn. But basically, like if you have an offer, it's like anyone can say, like, I can help you grow your audience. Like that's the benefit I offer right now. And then what's like the unique mechanism? What's the unique bridge that gets the person to that result? Whether it's writing, whether it's, I help you podcast to get to grow an audience. I help you podcast to get traffic to your offer. So like I use storytelling as the unique mechanism to get people to grow their audience, which eventually leads to monetizing and growing your online business. And then like another facet of it is I just love how storytelling underlays everything in the fabric of humanity and communication. Like stories have been around longer. Spoken stories have been around longer than writing. Most of our conversations are stories. Movies are stories. Our imaginations are stories. And there's just so many creative outlets to use storytelling, whether it's in business, whether it's in marketing, whether it's communication or anything. So I like how flexible it is, and almost like it's a skill that can take the shape of water, right? Or it's like, you pour water into a glass and it's the shape of that glass, where it's like storytelling could be that with any result. I help you use storytelling to grow your business. I help you use storytelling to get more traffic. So it's just something that can be leveraged very well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I really like the your analogy right here. So I know that I've been guilty of not leveraging stories really early on in my business, and one of the fears I think people have is that it makes them look vulnerable, right? If you talk about your failures, if you talk about the things that you've tried in the past where you didn't really succeed, and just talking about it publicly, it might make you feel a little bit insecure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a paid membership community of it's called the Society of Storytellers, and that's one of the most common problems that some of the members face. They're like, I just feel vulnerable. So like the more vulnerable you feel about hitting publish, the more you need to hit publish. And here's why is like in client stories, like if you're trying to get leads with a client story, no one wants to see, hey, I got my client $10,000 this month, right? It's never that easy. Client work is always tough. You're facing algorithms, you're facing attitudes, you're facing people, you're facing markets. And so like by being vulnerable and saying like, I have one where it's like, oh, my client, my ghostwriting client almost fired me because the algorithm was so bad I couldn't help him grow no matter what I did. There's this abysmal point where I'm like being vulnerable and telling them that, hey, there were factors out of my control that almost made me fail. But despite the odds, this is how I achieved it. And that's the difference of me getting, leads from that client story and someone else just saying, hey, I got this result, right? Like people love seeing the vulnerable failure. They want to make sure you're trustworthy. That's who people want to pay, is people they trust. And so like by being vulnerable, it makes you unique. It makes you stand out. It makes you not just another person in your niche. Like I have a friend, she's a certified financial professional. She's an absolute genius, just incredibly smart and good at what she does. And like, her and I talked about it. And I was like, if you share your struggles that you faced, it's going to make you more unique to the people that you're targeting. And then even more so is that like someone with a relatable experience is going to seek you out over everyone else because she can relate to you, right? And so I think that's the powerful part of it, is just not caring about what other people think and just being yourself. Because in turn, you're going to attract the people that are like you and kind of push away the people that aren't.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that makes perfect sense. So one of the main questions, or something that I see a lot of people ask is, well, I don't have anything to say. And I remember sometimes I still struggle with this, myself when I'm writing emails or when I'm writing articles, just asking myself, okay, like how can I weave in a story? And I'm just here kind of sometimes racking my head just to find something, because I know that there is something, but the problem is that we might not be trained, or we are not perhaps conscious about how to tell stories. So do you have any tips that listeners could apply to just start coming up with a few stories that it can use in their next piece of content?
Yeah, absolutely. There's this exercise that I made up that I love doing. It's called conflict mapping. And it's really interesting. So there's 5 types of conflict. And I guess before I get ahead of myself, what's one thing that makes a great story? Another common question I always get is, how do I know if this is a good story? How do I know if it's a great story? Any good story has a conflict and a solution, or a problem and a resolution, anything like that. And so by identifying conflicts in your life, we all face conflicts. That's what's going to get attention. And so there's 5 types of conflict. Essentially, there's person versus person, you versus another person versus themselves, right? So that could be like anxiety, depression, self-doubt, embarrassment, person versus society, which could be like, you versus your school, you versus the police, person versus fate, like the things that you can't control, and then person versus technology, for example, being a writer in the age of AI, right? And so when you have all those categories listed out and you look at it and you think, okay, what are some conflicts I've had with myself? Oh, okay. I was scared to leave my job. I was nervous to start my own business. I was nervous to hit publish. Okay, I've got 3 ideas there. What are some conflicts I've had with other people? Hey, that guy, that guy is mean. I don't like him. These people lied about me. Oh, there's 2. And so like you can go through these and literally flesh out all these conflicts. And not only will you have ideas, they'll be interesting and they're likely stuff that people can relate to. And then if you can provide a solution, a unique solution or lesson to those, you pretty much have the formula for a basic story.
I love that. That's really powerful. So another question that I have is, especially for those who are, for the listeners who are actually thinking about getting started creating content, might it be on social, might it be with writing long form articles. There is one thing that I keep saying, and it's the fact that at the beginning, when you're just getting started, no one really cares about you, what you want to do, right? Unless you can solve a problem. So I would really like to get your take on that, on how to combine, those 2 things. Number one, people are selfish. People only care about themselves. And why would anyone online who doesn't know me actually listen to my story?
Yeah. So I mean, at the end of the day, people are burning mental calories when they're reading or watching videos on social media. They don't want friction. They're selfish. How am I going to learn something? How am I going to benefit? It's just human psychology. And so, like, by having that in there, it's like, I was a bad thing. Now I'm a good thing. Here are the 10 lessons I learned to help you get the same result. Hopefully that answers your question, Matt.
Yep, absolutely. So let's switch gear a little bit to go back to your story. You understood that there was no future for you blogging and writing about electricity. So you started writing or creating content around, storytelling. So what were your first moves and how did you actually start getting some traction?
Yeah, everything was I just wrote my story. I was like, I'm 28. I'm a high six-figure entrepreneur through real estate and other assets, and I explained that in the thread. If I lost everything today, here's how I would get it back in half the time. And I literally just listed everything I did and learned along the way. And overnight, that story went viral, and then I just got tons of traction. And essentially, I was just like, wow, this is a story. People really like it and they resonate. It resonates with them. And so I just started studying and sharing stories online, and it just gained traction fast.
And like, how do you start writing those kind of viral stories? Because I hear a lot of people, like, I might be totally, biased because, and this might also be kind of a limiting belief, but I'm very open about it, is that I really don't thrive when it comes to short form content. So like I've been listening to a lot of podcast interviews where people actually say that, well, I was just writing for 30 days or for a specific amount of days. And then finally, like my thread or my tweet or my post whatsoever actually went viral. So I've been trying, perhaps I've been trying badly, but I've been trying, putting in the reps, or just to create some kind of short form content. But this never really happened. So can you walk us behind the mechanics and how do actually someone needs to think in order just to create those kind of viral pieces that seems to kickstart growth?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a number of different strategies, and that necessarily like chasing virality isn't the best metric, right? It's kind of like a lot of mine were just happy accidents, and sometimes after enough experience, I kind of find out what works and what doesn't. Like study what works, study the metrics on your short form posts. What's getting the most engagement? Is there a gem there? Is there a reason why that one's getting more engagement than others? And then, go off of that one with the most engagement, see how many other angles you can have. For example, you can be like, I use speed reading to read 50 books this year. Here's 5 tips, 5 tactics I use to read faster. If that one does better, then you can just have stuff about ingesting information. You can have stuff about reading or productivity and stuff like that. Like how many different angles can you have off of that best performing engaged tweet or short form? And it's a lot of it's an experiment, man. Like I'm writing, like I ghostwrite for clients, and like sometimes it's hot and it's not. And it's just always like analyzing and studying what works. But that being said, one of the biggest things that you can do is the social game. And it's by making friends and having them share your stuff. Like the biggest metric of virality is, will someone share this with their friends? And so what you really want to do is to find a common problem that people face and solve it in a unique way, in a way that people will share with their friends that have that problem. And for example, it's like, here's how to create 100 story ideas in minutes. Here's how to get a big result in a little amount of time. People love the contrast there. They love the juxtaposition. They want to find out what's in between. And they're going to share that with their friends who are storytellers or anything like that, right? So I'd find a common problem, whether your niche is like, let's just say like, your niche is writing. You can go to the biggest writing content creators, look in the comments, see what the common problems are. I use Facebook groups for like creative writers, and I go in and I search in quotations, how do I have a problem with, I need help with, and I find tons of problems there. And I also have like a I have an autoresponder on my email, and I have people sign up, and I'm like, hey, what's your one roadblock? That way I can always see what problems are coming in. We're constantly solving problems and offering value to these problems that keep coming up. Eventually, one of them is going to take off, and people are going to share it.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So, another thing, and I like like throwing in those kind of questions where we might have some kind of diverging opinions. I just think that it keeps the conversation spicy. So one of the things is that I keep hearing, and I think I heard this from you too in another interview, is that people mention that, well, short form is the way to go because the feedback loops are shorter and faster than, let's say, on a blog, a Medium, on YouTube, whatsoever. However, when you're just getting started, there is no feedback. So how do you respond to that?
Yeah. So I have like two takeaways from that question, Matt. Essentially, number one, this is what Mark Manson did, and this is what I do: is like short form, and just blasting ideas all the time, seeing what takes off. And essentially, like, my best threads were once tweets that performed well. And like for a story, for example, and this is what I teach in my membership, is essentially you can post a story every day. First sentence, X time ago, I had a problem. Now people know there's a problem. They know who's in it. They know when it happens. They know the setup. They know the conflict. Second sentence, you can agitate the conflict, and it got worse. Third sentence, it's the solution. And then the fourth sentence is the takeaway. And so what you do is you can just have these 4-sentence stories on Twitter that you post every day, and then see which one works the best. And then you can take that and turn it into a thread. And then when that one performs well, you can turn that into a LinkedIn long form. You can turn that into a Medium post, and a blog form, and then a newsletter. And then that way you're taking this little snippet of an idea, whether it is a micro story or something else, and you're letting it do the work for you. You're not writing a thread that you don't know if it's going to hit or miss. You're writing it because you know it's been validated by the market. So that said, that's kind of like the big picture strategy. But to go back onto what you were asking in the beginning, it's a grind of building your network. Like it's more so consistently posting every day and literally making as many friends as you possibly can. It's commenting on people's stuff so often and consistently that they see your face, they recognize you, and they comment back. And what this is doing is essentially you're building this network of people that reply to your stuff because you always reply on their stuff. And it just builds and builds and builds to the point where, okay, it's not so much about how much outreach and commenting you do, it's about the quality of your content. And so like the thing is like people forget this. It's like, it's a grind. Like it's social media. Like people aren't just going to look at your stuff like random guy and say, oh, okay, like you need to hustle and meet people and comment. And it's a grind. Like I can't stand commenting anymore, but I did it so much that eventually I would have more engagement than a lot of big accounts. And the funny thing is, it's like the friend effect. Like a year after I started growing online, I launched a product and it did about $20,000 in 5 days. And granted, it took me a year to get there, but it did so well because all the friends I made along the way promoted it. And who's going to promote your content? Who's going to promote your products, your services? It's your friends, right? Because you're all growing together. And so like that was the key to my success during all that, was just leveraging like friendship. And I think that's a lot of people forget. They're like, oh, I just need to create content, post it, and send it. And that doesn't work. It's like your friends constantly commenting on it, making more friends, more people commenting on it. And you start to build this leverage and this momentum as more and more friends that you make are commenting and engaging with your content, who will likely see it start to improve and share it with their friends.
I love this. I love it. Like, I really love the transparency right here because yes, this is something that I thought at the beginning too, is just, if your content is good enough, then ultimately you're going to rank. So honestly, like I started, 10 plus years ago. So it was like pretty easy, to rank on Google, etc., even on YouTube. So it was like, yeah, just produce good content. The algorithm is going to reward you more or less. But the thing is, the more competition there is, the more important do you, and even also like with the rise of AI generated content, right? The more important is the human aspect, like who is actually endorsing you, who is talking about you, right? So no, like the algorithm can only help you until a certain point, right? But at the end, what would make the difference is, okay, what are other humans saying about you? So this can be other creators in your space. These can be your clients, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like a lot of it is too, it's like, so there's content and there's distribution. And like you can have great content, but if it's not distributed correctly, then no one's going to see it. And like another thing is like, if you make friends, it's like, hey, dude, I put a lot of time into this post. Would you mind giving it some love? And then like having your 5 or 10 friends repost it, right? And like that's kind of the grind that you start with in the beginning, is like you and your friends repost each other's stuff, and then it kind of keeps going. And then like, one of my strategies was just relentlessly commenting on bigger accounts. And there's something psychologically when a human just sees somebody working so hard and like commenting on everything for a month or two, that they follow you. And I ended up making friends with a couple of bigger accounts. They had like 40 or 50,000 followers when I had 600 followers, and they were just like, dude, I just respect your grind. Like you're putting the work in there. I see it. And like my first viral post, I was like, hey, dude, like it was like a 25 tweet post. Like it was so long. I was like, I put a ton of work into this. You mind if I get some love on it? And he shared it. And then, his friends shared it because it was good content. And then it went viral overnight. But there was like all of that legwork to build. And I didn't comment on his stuff to, like to just be like, oh, okay, well, he'll be my friend. He'll share my stuff. It was like just genuinely engaging with his content and being interested in it over a longer period of time.
Yeah. So I love that lesson too. So it's really all about being genuine, right? Because there are a lot of transactional people out there, right? It's just like, oh, okay, like I might benefit from this guy later down the road or this or that, right? So like, it's not really, bad mouthing about people, but that's just, some people are just like that, right? So I think it all comes back to really, finding the few creators that you really, enjoy their content, generally enjoying their content, and simply leaving genuine comments, right? It might sound a little bit cliche, but this is what I take away from this.
Yeah. Like that's the grind, is just being a decent person, helping other people out for free, reaching out to them and saying like, hey, this is what I do. I might not have anything to offer, but if I can ever help in any way, just let me know. And just being genuine. I mean, one of my great friends, Kieran Drew, this is what he did. Like I first met him and I had a mentorship underneath him, and it was amazing. But he reached out to me because he was just a genuine guy. He was like, hey, that was a great post. It's like, keep it up. And like, those are the kind of people that do really well. Because at the end of the day, trust is, I think, it's always been the oldest form of currency, but I think it matters more than ever now that we just see pictures and content and not necessarily the person underneath. And I think that's something a lot of people forget. And to go back on what you said, Matt, it's like, oh, I made $20,000 in a weekend, or I did this. It just kind of like destroys the trust factor, because I see a lot of people doing it, right? It's like, oh, I had $100,000 launch. Okay, you have a business partner, so that's split. It's 50K. Okay, you pay copywriters to write your sales page and your emails. Okay, and then you paid VAs to do this, and then you paid for distribution with paid retweets or outreach or whatever, right? And then like, oh, and then what about taxes? So at the end of the day, you made about 20 or 25K, and it's like no one's showing the bedlining near that. Or like Kieran Drew would show emails where he like lost money. Like he's like, yeah, I had 100K month, and next month I lost a bunch of money. Like just being transparent about it. And then like leveraging your journey story. And like Kieran did this, and I did this too. It's like, hey, I'm quitting my job as a dentist, and I'm going all in. I'm like, I'm quitting my job and moving to Brazil so I can try to make money online. Follow me along the way. And then when you do win, I mean, you just share your mistakes, your failures, your wins, your losses, your obstacles, your lessons learned along the ways to achieve this goal. And then when you get there, like, it's amazing the support that you get from people. Like when I quit my job and launched my product, the amount of people that reached out and were like, the people that were in the weeds that I've never even talked to, that were like, it was so cool to see you do that. Like it inspires me to do that. So it's like kind of just sharing your bold, audacious goals and like journaling about it until you get there. And it's like documented and people see it every day. It makes them feel like they're a part of your story, right? And I think it's very powerful. And I think people feel too vulnerable to do this. And yeah, I think it's something that's really missing. And I think the people that are the most successful are the ones that do that. And they are often the most trustworthy people because they're so vulnerable and they just share so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I think vulnerability is one thing. And the other thing is like, do people really care about like what my goals are at the end, right?
Yeah, people do. People do. Because a lot of people have similar goals. Like it's like a sports team. People go and watch, say, like Manchester United all the time and buy all their clothes and spend thousands on tickets to see them all the time because when they win, they feel like they win. They're on the journey with that sports team, right? They get the same feeling. And so, like, I mean, if you fail, they're never going to get that feeling. They're going to forget about you. But then if you're like, I freaking did it, like milestone, I hit 20,000 followers, milestone, I made my first dollar. Like people love that. And and then you can just reuse that narrative. Like 11 months ago, I made my first dollar, and then it's like $100,000 later. This is everything I learned in between. And then you can do it like, the next year, 23 months ago, I made my first dollar. Hopefully $1 million later or something. Here's everything I learned in between, and just kind of rehash that narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, let me switch gears again. So, and another thing that I would like to know about your writing process, and correct me if I'm wrong or not, is that like how I see it or how I usually create content is that I like to first create kind of along those 20, 30 minutes where I'm just, flushing out my ideas, getting clear what I want to talk about. And then actually taking it or creating some kind of short form out of it. Is your process similar to that, or do you actually just start with, if we take the example or the template that you shared previously, like those 4 sentences, or do you directly start with short form content?
Yeah, I mean, I used to start with short form and just build from there. Like I used to just have tweets and then like take whatever performed well and just recycle it into a thread. Now, I mean, I can write an email in about 15 minutes, and basically I just spit it out with like story, lesson, offer. Like, oh, there was this problem. This is the unique way I solved it. Here's a lesson. You want to find out more? Click here. So now I just do long form pretty much. I really rarely write the short stuff. I just kind of have like punchy long form, punchy threads, and everything like that.
And how do you explain like this change in your writing process?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it's just being able to sit down in the morning. I always have a journal and I have a Notion doc of all my ideas. And then I have a Google sheet filled with my audiences or my target customers' problems. And so like, I'll just go look at a problem and I'll think about how I solved it or how someone else solved it that's famous or how a business solved that problem. Mm-hmm. Or even like I wrote an email about freaking like crocodiles and why like you need to be a crocodile and be patient to have long-term success online or something like that. And it's just like, okay, here's a unique idea that's introducing the problem, and here's a unique solution. So I basically I sit down at the table in the morning and I know what the problem is. I know how to solve it in a unique way that's creative, and then how to like show a lesson. And that's pretty much it. Like it just kind of comes out, but then I do edit either later that day or the next day because I have a fresher set of eyes. When I try to edit right after I wrote, I tend to miss a lot of stuff. I have a different state of mind when I approach it and edit it later.
Yep. Like this is definitely also one of the things that I've noticed on my end is that I usually like, to write, let's say, all the content for the week in 1 or 2 days. So might be the daily emails, might be articles, whatsoever. And then actually let it sit for a week, right? And when you go back to it after a week, like you totally forgot like what you wrote about. And the interesting thing is that I found that it, like the longer the period between your first draft and when you're going to edit it, I just found it the better the content looks like at the end. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree. I used to take a day to write everything, and now I just do it off the cuff pretty much.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So Parker, you went from janitor to 6-figure, hopefully soon 7-figure content creator. So with everything that you know today, what would you have done differently, or what are the pieces of advice that you would like to pass on to the listeners who might be at the beginning of their journey?
Yeah, my suggestion would be learn a skill that's in demand, but you're curious about. Learn to write well. Learn to write in a way that can communicate your ideas, or learn to speak well on video. Either learn video or how to write, so that way you can communicate your ideas to people. Those are the biggest ones. Like, I wish I didn't take forever to learn copywriting, but learning copywriting is like one of the best skills that just keeps paying dividends for me, whether it's writing video scripts for clients, writing content, writing email campaigns, sales pitches. It's something that people, even in the age of AI, like, people still need you to sell their ideas. So I would either learn copy, or I would learn like sales and your speech, anything like that, and take those two skills to a social media platform at the moment, not a blog, and just start writing on social media, growing an audience, and seeing how your audience responds to what you're writing, what you're communicating. Study them, know them better than they know themselves, do the research, compile their problems together, start your newsletter, learn to write newsletters. They're fun. Get everyone on the newsletter as fast as possible, and then just start selling different things to solve that problem.
Awesome. Parker, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate the conversation and all the nuggets that you dropped here. And what's the best way for the listeners to connect with you?
Yeah, you can follow me either on LinkedIn or Twitter at, it's my last name, at Worth, WORTH_Parker. Or you can sign up for my newsletter and you get a free gift. It's a free course. You get 1,000 followers in 30 days. And that is on my website, parkerworth.com. And then you can sign up for my newsletter when you get that free gift.
Awesome. Parker, thank you very much. I wish you all the best on your journey, and looking forward to chat soon.
Sounds good, Matt. Thanks for your time. It was a lot of fun.
All right. So hope that you've enjoyed this episode. And as always, you're going to find all the links we mentioned in the show notes. And if you're a content creator or want to become one and want to monetize your knowledge online, then be also sure to check out my free emails, because in my daily emails, you're going to learn how you can speed up your content creation workflow to create more content faster and thus attract more clients online in less time. It's the first link in the description. Thank you very much for tuning in today, and I see you next week.